Hi everyone. My name's Dave. I am the manager here for Seaside Library. Thanks for coming to the event. We're happy, we're proud to have Larry Yoda and Tim Thomas. So we're going to have a couple different things today. First we'll have A is for Abalone, Way to Monterey presentation, and then we'll have a little video and some talks and information and history about the early years of Japanese Americans on Monterey Peninsula. This is part one. Part two will be more like war years to the present, and that will be in Marina Library on May 30th. It's a Saturday, 1 o'clock, same time. So we're happy to kick it off today in celebration of the Asian Pacific Islander American Heritage Month. I don't know if you saw when you walked in, we had a display on the right side as you walked in of early years, Japanese Americans. And then we had a book display on the left, and then we have a couple more book displays in the library. So yeah, we're happy to have you here, and I don't want to talk too much, so we'll have Larry and Tim, and yeah.
Yeah, so Tim will kick it off.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here today. Again, yes, my name is Tim Thomas, and how I got involved in all this, I actually am a fisheries historian, and I have been researching the history of the fisheries in Monterey Bay, believe it or not, for well over 40 years. And I was the historian curator of the Field Monterey Maritime Museum, and for many years, and that chasing that fishing story brought me to the JACL, because it was that Japanese story that intrigued me, and it was a story that was never really told, or if it was never told properly. And they accepted me into the JACL, and I've been on the board there for 16 years, I figured out this morning. And curated a little museum we have down there. And so the last 20 years of my work has focused primarily on the Japanese story, and in particular on the abalone story. So I'm going to see if this is what it's supposed to do. Oh, okay. So it's going to start here. This is a gentleman, Arlo Sabaru Noda. Noda, it was a labor contractor who came to Monterey in 1895. He got a job working for the land arm of the Southern Pacific Railroad, the Pacific Improvement Company. They had purchased about 8,000 acres of the Monterey Peninsula because they had this quirky idea they could turn Monterey into a tourist paradise. So these workers were clearing land, and he would provide for these workers food and water and wood for their fires. And he was gathering wood near the wharf one day and looked into the harbor and just saw this huge abundance of abalone. And so much abalone, he described it in a letter as being a carpet of abalone. And nobody did with it. And the reason nobody was doing with it is nobody knew what the heck you're supposed to do with it. Unless you prepare abalone properly, and it's kind of like eating a rubber boot. The Japanese, who would do with abalone for centuries, they knew what to do with it. So notice on writes his letter back up to Japan. He says, hey, all this abalone here, nobody wants it. The government of Japan sends a guy named Jinosuke Kodani, that's Mr. Kodani on the left side, in the shoulder right there, whose family was in the abalone business in the Chiba prefecture of Japan. In fact, they were famous for their salted, dried abalone. In between that time, Noda goes down to what is now Cannery Row and leases a piece of property there. If you know Cannery Row, there's an empty lot next to the El Torito restaurant. Someday they're going to put some kind of marketplace thing there. So they keep telling me. And he leased that very piece of property and then sent back to Japan for other Japanese fishermen. And he created a little Japanese fishing colony on that site down there. Let's see if I got it next. That's Mr. Kodani there. As I mentioned, the family is famous for their salted dried abalone. Handsome man that he was, you see there. He sent for ama divers, known as free divers here. And these were three of them arrived here in late December 1897, and I actually know who they are. I've seen their passports. And they arrived here, and they were picked up at the train station in Monterey and taken down to Noda's dive camp, or his fishing camp on Ocean View Avenue down there. Got dressed in traditional army gear, which you can see just consists little thin white cotton outfit there, abalone basket, there's an abalone pry, pair of goggles like these right here, right? They would have pig clouds on the end that they would squeeze to release the pressure. So they got dressed up this morning, went into the Monterey Bay, jumped into the water, and about 10 seconds later they jumped like out and they said, "The Johnny son, you didn't tell us how cold that water is." There's actually a 15-degree water temperature difference between Monterey and Cuba Peninsula, where these guys come from. That is a huge difference. Now, we make a lot of this. The truth is, they were diving like this in Monterey Bay into the 1920s. These guys are good at it. It was tradition for them. And how they usually operated, they operated as a pair, like this, on a boat. And usually on the boat, in the middle of the boat, there would be a barrel with a flower going constantly. And then they trade off, going back and forth into the water. So one guy went to the water, they tie a rope around his waist and went through a pulley system. You go down, following an anchor line down into the bay, going down 20, 30, 40 feet into the bay. Now keep in mind, he has no air source. He's holding his breath. He's holding the breath up to 8 minutes. Yeah, they have when he comes to the surface, his partner into that boat will take the other end of that rope, which has a weight attached to it, usually just a big rock, and toss it inside the boat, and yank that guy back to the surface. And it's right off, going back and forth, which is pretty good. But it was, by the turn of the 20th century, they sent for helmet divers. This is known as camp on Canada Row. This is one of the first divers dove off this very beach, right here on what is now Canada Row. So Kodani eventually makes his way around the Monterey Peninsula and to what is now Point Lobos. You've all been to Point Lobos, I'm going to guess. You all know that Point Lobos is the center of the universe, right? Well, I think it's one of them. The Lower Presidio is the center of the universe, in my opinion. But anyway, he made his way around to Point Lobos, where this gentleman, a guy named Alexander and Bill Allen, owned all that property. And Allen was a mining engineer. He was also a racetrack designer. He got to design Camp Grand Race Park, other things like that. There was a coal mine that was part of it at Point Lobos in the 19th century, and it was producing a really low-grade kind of coal. The coal mine wasn't making a lot of money, and so the partners decided to sell off Point Lobos, try to turn a little town into it, and try to sell home lots. But believe it or not, it was a very tough sell. I mean, nobody wanted to live out there. It was isolated. You're away from Monterey. You couldn't get anywhere. There was no bus or anything. And so Allen decided there was something better to do with that property. So he bought it from his partners, and also bought the very few lots that were sold, and he preserved it. So Point Lobos looks the way it does today, thanks to Allen, right there. But he leased his property to Kodani and then watched him operate for about a year, and he decided, hey, I should join in him, and he became Kodani's partner. And they created the Point Lobos Canning Company at Deep Sea Abalone, of course, Monterey, California, although they were working out of Point Lobos. They built a cannery. Again, if you know Point Lobos, where the parking lot is, where the divers go today, that's where they built a small cannery. They were canning abalone to try to create a Western market for it, and they were shipping canned abalone to Japan, although they didn't want the canned abalone in Japan. They were also drying abalone, because that's where the market was for them. There was no real Western market for abalone in California or anywhere at that time. But dried abalone is a very important thing in Japan, not just as a food product, but as a cultural thing. It's very important. It's sort of a lost art now, where they dry abalone and it's pounded into big long strips. Just a few people do that kind of stuff today in Japan, but it's oftentimes at holiday times, especially at New Year, you'll get a card with the strip dried abalone in the card that represents good luck and other kinds of things. It's very, very important. So they sent helmet divers. This is a group of helmet divers. I love this photograph. This is actually a stage image that I love about it. This is at Point Lobos, and you can see, number one, before the abalone company, there was a whaling in business out there, Portuguese whalers. This is a Portuguese whaler who went to work for Kodani and A.M. Allen. And you can see here, so these are the helmet divers, but even for these guys, that water was too cold. So they all learned to be knitters, They take wool sweaters, they tear them apart, they knit this wool underwear, put on a pair of that, sometimes two pairs of that, put on their clothes, put on a big heavy canvas suit, attach about 65 pounds of lead weight to the front and back, tie lead to their shoes, bolt on the helmet, which weighs about 35 pounds, and go down into the bag. Of course, there's a hose you can see attached to it. In the early days, they were hand pumping the air down to the diver. He's going down 15, 20, 30, 40 feet into the bay. The deeper he went, the harder it was to pump. So I always told they only had their, either their family member or their best friend on the pump doing that. In the 1920s, they put air compressors on the boat, so now they're pushing the air to the diver with a motor. Now the diver's going down 40, 50, 60, 80, even up to 100 feet into the Monterey Bay. I don't know here is a diver, but at that level, number one, you cannot see anything, so you're on your hands and knees trying to find that baloney. And number two, you can't stay down there very long at that level, or you get what they call the bends, which can kill you. So you work your way up very slowly to a 30-foot level where they keep down all day collecting abalone. Also, when they used the hand pumps, they had to clean those pumps every day. They take them apart, had to lubricate all their shooting parts. And the only good oil they could find in Monterey at that time was olive oil. So they were lubricating all those parts with olive oil, and the divers all complaining that it's olive oil. Down there. But again, what about this image is I can see the dive gear. There was a dive company in Tokyo that's still there that was producing this gear, and they didn't like the American gear. They wanted the Japanese gear. And in fact, the dive company in Tokyo began to produce that wool underwear strictly for the divers here in California, and particularly here in Monterey. But look at the helmets. You can see how clean they are. There's no dents in any of them, so I can tell this picture is brand new. That gear is brand new when they first tried to do that right there. So again, they were looking for a Western market. This is a label from the can, abalone they were canning. Again, it was still a tough sell, no pun intended here. They worked with the chef at the Hotel Del Monte, developing recipes for their canned abalone. They were steaming it in the cans. It's like they were cooking sardines or any kind of fish product. That's how they were doing it. They were steaming it in the can and selling it at different places. They were using it for salads and different kinds of things. Before this, they were trying to serve abalone. They would beat it and burn out sacks to the point where it was almost like jelly, or they would put lies on it to try to soften it up. So all kinds of different things. It was just a real difficult thing to work with. These are two divers that came to Monterey around the turn of the 20th century, Mr. Suzuki and Mr. Kawadani here. And these are photographs. I've been to this part of Japan, where you guys come from many times. And I went to none of these little houses. And each house I went into, they all had these photographs of their relatives that came to Monterey. And if you look closely, you can see, first of all, they're dressed up Western style, right? And you can see that it says F.L. Swain Portraits, Monterey, California. They all got their picture taken one day. And so, again, if you look at the photograph in the middle, you can see the same two guys on the left side there. And that is, and the middle is Mr. Kodani, and I believe that's his younger brother, Nakajo Kodani, next to him. But Nakajo Kodani was an actual trained marine biologist, and he came to Monterey for a very short period, and then he went back to Japan. It was Nakajo's job to sign divers to come to Monterey. And you didn't have to have any experience. I mean, Mr. Kawadami there on the left side there, he was a rice farmer, you know, and he wasn't a diver. He was a young guy, and he's watching all these guys going off to California, and then he said, I want to do that. Young guy, come adventurous, going off to a foreign country and everything. And so they signed him up, and they put him on a ship, sailed across the Pacific. It took about 3 weeks or so in those days. Came into San Francisco, I think it was in December of 1907, got on the train, the Del Monte Express, come down to Monterey, pick him up at the train station, take him out to Point Lobos, and with the day of arriving, with no experience whatsoever, he's diving abalone. He hated it. He could read and write, which is really unusual, and I've actually seen his diaries. Now, I don't read Japanese, but I had a friend who read it for me and translated what was in the diaries. So he got out of the diving part, and he began to collect abalone, what he called Japanese, what he called Chinese style, a big long 15-foot pole with a pie on the end. They would pop, use a viewing box to find the abalone and pop it into a basket, he'd lower it, and he'd that pride to do that. But he also would write letters to the other divers, he would read letters to the other divers, and he was a bookkeeper for the other divers in Monterey. So this is another part of that. This is what's known as a Maori. And these are indigenous to that part of Japan, the Chiba Prefecture of Japan. Anybody here been to Japan? So Japan, as you know, all these look up at what they call prefects, kind of like states, and these all come from the Chiba Prefecture. You ever go to Japan, you'll be flying into Narita Airport, which is a big airport though. And that's in the Chiba Prefecture. And these guys all come from way down the end of that. And the little area known as Boso, or Minimum Boso, it's a big, beautiful peninsula. It looks a lot like Monterey, amazingly enough. And so these jackets are indigenous. The fishing community still is today. They fish all kinds of things there today. And this is a tradition that goes back hundreds of years. And what it is, at the end of a good fishing season, the company owner will give to his fishermen this piece of painted fabric that represents their particular fishery. And then the fishermen in turn would have these jackets made, which they would wear for a very special event. And I worked with a museum there. I was a guest curator for an exhibit there a few years ago, and they have hundreds of those in their collection. But this is a special one. If you look at it, you see the American flag, Japanese flag, even down there says Ide. Ide was a partner of Noda. Ide and Company, Monterey, USA. That was from here. We had no idea these existed until 30 years ago. None. But this is something they would have gotten in Japan, not something they got here in Monterey. And what we know about this particular jacket is that it was made about 1900, 126 years ago. And there less than 10 of them were ever made. And there are only 2 that exist today. So there's one on exhibit at a museum in Japan, and now one on exhibit at another museum in Monterey at the JCL Heritage Center. And it was given to us by a woman whose grandfather came to Monterey. It was the first group of helmet divers who came to Monterey. And so we're really honored to be able to have her. She's actually very interesting, because the one that's on exhibit in the museum in Tateyama looks like it's brand new, bright, thick blue color. The coloring is blue, bright, and beautiful. And she was very apologetic about this because it's faded, it's torn. And she explained to us that after World War II, their family, like many Japanese families at the end of the war, were destitute. And this is all they had to wear, was this jacket. So, as you can imagine, there was a great deal of anti-Japanese sentiment in this country, coming primarily from white workers who convinced the Japanese to come and take their job, which really wasn't the case. And they were very, very suspicious of the abalone industry that was going on here, because no one else in Monterey ate abalone. Nobody talked about abalone. This is a newspaper story that actually went across the entire United States. I found this in a newspaper that appeared in Montgomery, Alabama, right? This is about the Monterey abalone fishery. It says, "Yellow spies work Frisco." And what this story is about is what it says is they believe that the Japanese were driving abalone in Monterey Bay, not to get abalone, but they were actually mapping the Monterey Bay to prepare for the Japanese army to land in Santa Cruz, march over the Santa Cruz Mountains, and take the city of San Francisco. Now, there was a lot of concern at that time of the Japanese military. They had just completed this maritime war with Russia, which they had won, so there was no big concern. That's why Teddy Roosevelt sent his Great White Fleet, if you're familiar with that story, around the Pacific, across the Pacific into Tokyo Bay to show the United States mighty fleet. But here's the cool thing I think is interesting about that, is that that first picture I showed you of Mr. Noda and Kodani, that was actually a group of men. That was known as the Japanese Association. They were started in Monterey in 1907 to help the city of Monterey raise money that could bring Teddy Roosevelt's Great White Fleet to Monterey. That's what they did. This is a group of Japanese businessmen, all associated with the fishing industry, mostly the abalone fishery, that were doing that. And they raised about $100. And then when the Great White Fleet did come to Monterey in June of 1908, it was Monterey Japanese community that went out in little boats to greet them, all waving American flags as they came in. By the way, the last week was the 100th anniversary of our JACO Hall, and it was the Japanese Association that built that hall, and so we're all very proud of that there. So then the big part of this whole story is this gentleman right here. This is a German restaurateur, Pop Ernest Volter, also known as the Abalone King. Pop Volter came to Monterey with his large family in 1907, opened a little restaurant right on Alvarado Street, known as the Cafe Ernest, sort of a European-style, Bohemian-style restaurant, where everybody come and spend the whole evening in the restaurant. And believe it or not, people did not eat a lot of seafood in those days, at least not Monterey, but they did like to eat oysters. Oysters were very, very popular, but you know what? They don't get a lot of oysters in Monterey Bay, so they had to come by train. And there used to be oyster farms in the Oakland Estuary. So if you know anything about trains, in the 19th century, probably the 20th century, trains had a tendency to break down. There'll be a cow on the track. Something will slow that train down. Oftentimes, Pop would go to the train station in Monterey and get an order of oysters, and they would be spoiled. There goes his night of business right there, all gone. Go look at something music is served in his restaurant, and he's watching all the striped abalone leaving the Monterey area. He said, abalone, yeah, kind of like giant oysters. So he brought them into his restaurant in the spring of 1908, experimented with it, finally came up with this famous recipe where you slice the foot. All an abalone is a big marine snail. That's what it is, right? You slice the foot, pound it, and you don't just pound it. There's a certain technique to doing that. And then you wrap it egg wash, cracker crumb, cook it up quickly in olive oil and butter. And soon people came from all over these best LA steaks and Pop's restaurant. And they'd sing songs and write poetry, like some folks go to the quail on toast because they think it's Tony. But I'm content to own my rent and live on abalone. George Stern took this guest book in 1913. This is inside Pop's restaurant. In 1913, you can see Pop in the back there. His kids were the waiters and also cooked in the restaurant right there. But 1913 is a very important year. 1913, number one, the state of California made it illegal for the Japanese to ship dried abalone out of the state. Now they could ship the canned product, but as I mentioned, they didn't want the canned product in Japan. They wanted the dried product. What are they going to do? 1913, Pop was offered a job by a restaurant in San Francisco called the Hot Brow to bring his abalone recipes to that sophisticated audience up from San Francisco, right? In fact, he offered so much money that he had no option to shut down his Monterey restaurant, pack up his family, pack up his abalone recipes, move to San Francisco, and prepare abalone up there. But even up there, it was a tough sell. In fact, he had to bring, the abalone was coming from Monterey, and he had the same issues with the train as he had with his oysters. In 1915, the World's Fair comes to San Francisco, called Panama Pacific International Exposition. A huge World's Fair in honor of the opening of the Panama Canal had opened a couple of years before, and you've all been to San Francisco, I'm sure. The Palace of Fine Arts was built for that World's Fair. Just a big mudflat. They threw it all in for that World's Fair. Only there for 1 year. And every state was represented, and California, the largest of the state buildings, and every county was represented in that state building. And Monterey County was the largest of the exhibits. And look at Monterey County, this is part of the Monterey County exhibit. And look what they're exhibiting. Abalone diver in a cave. Look, all that abalone in the case is over there. Everybody remember the old Pacific Rim Museum of Natural History? They had that, you go in there with your kids, they have the under the water exhibit. It was made for this World's Fair, that's what I got. You can see the canned abalone there around the diver. And then as I mentioned, Point Lobos, they had their own booth at that World's Fair. They're getting those cans of abalone as a souvenir, and sending folks down to the hot dog and full abalone dinners, and soon the whole world wanted to talk. Hotels, restaurants, all want this new sensation, abalone. Pop says there's money to be made here. He packs up his family, packs up his abalone recipes, moves back to Monterey. Actually lives out of Point Lobos and works with Kodani and Allen. And he did the Point Lobos inside that laborer's cabin. He was preparing abalone steak, like a assembly line of people pounding abalones to ship to restaurants and hotels throughout Northern California. In fact, Pop's wife stayed in San Francisco and acted as a broker selling abalone steak up and down California. Then 1919, Pop goes down to the Monterey Wharf, opens the very first restaurant on the Monterey Wharf, and became known as the abalone king. Abalone salads, abalone steak, abalone stew. It was famous for his abalone stew. And they served in the shell. They filled the holes of the shell with lead. Just a little lead, not very much. But here's the thing, and why this is important. Because of that recipe that he invents in his little restaurant in 1908, he literally saved the California abalone industry, not just in Monterey, but in California. He saved that industry. And because of that recipe, by 1920, there were 9 full-time abalone fisheries operating out the Monterey Wharf, 9 of them. In 1929, the California abalone industry brought in close to $1 million in revenue. 75% of it coming out of Monterey Bay by Japanese divers. Prior to World War II, the majority of the businesses in the Monterey Wharf were Japanese-owned. Fish markets, abalone processors. All because of the recipe that this guy invents in his little restaurant in 1908. So as I mentioned, I've been doing this kind of work for well over 40 years. I've studied fisheries, all kinds, every fishery you can think of. And it's my opinion that the abalone fishery is the most important fishery in the history of California. It was not economically, but it is definitely historically and culturally. But even the word abalone comes from Monterey. The first divers for abalone in Monterey were the Indian people of Monterey, who were the Rumsen people. They were diving abalone, and they had diving for, I'll get over here, for the red abalone. This is the largest of the abalone. And they had to work that abalone. That word is aloon, and linguist. Now trace the word abalone back to this word aloon that starts right here in Monterey. That is a cool thing, don't you think? Yeah. So this is in John Pop's restaurant, about 1930 or so. We said, I can't go without telling this. This is my old friend Roy Hattori. Roy was the last of the Japanese abalone divers. But more importantly, Roy was the only diver, only one, that was born here. He was Nisei, second generation. All the divers came to Japan. There's a couple exceptions returned to Japan. But Roy was born in Monterey in 1919. So I asked him how he learned to be a diver. He told me he was a young man. He had just graduated from Monterey High School. When this picture was taken, actually, he was 18 years old. His father went into the abalone business. During the Depression, debts to pay. He thought this would be a good way to make some money. But he had no experience in this business, but he had friends who were in it. In fact, Roy's older brother actually worked on an abalone boat, not as a diver, but he was a tender on one of those boats. He borrows some equipment, takes Roy in the middle of Monterey Harbor, dresses him up in all that wool underwear, puts on his clothes, builds a heavy canvas suit, attaches 65 pounds of lead weight to his front back, ties lead to his shoes, bolts on the helmet. They just toss him on the side of the Oh my God. Start running down there. Luckily, the older divers took him under the wing and showed him what to do. This is Roy here in his dive boat. This is another boat. So these companies would go out for 3 days at a time. By the way, the abalone season can be very long. It fluctuates from year to year. They can go up to 9 months. They would dive an abalone. They leave Monterey for 3 days usually, going south mostly, down past Point Surrey, all the way to Santa Barbara area. We're in 1939. By the way, Roy discovered the white abalone in 1939. They would also go north up towards Santa Cruz as well. So they would stay in the evenings. They would live on the mother boat. During the day, they're on the dive boat. They're going around diving abalone. There's Roy going into the water right there, and you can see his brother and cousin in this photograph here. And these, by the way, these photographs are also, as you can tell, stage images. And Roy's best friend in that time was a guy named Ray Ruppel. He was a local photographer. They're about the same age. They liked to play sports together. And they had this idea this industry was so unique that they thought they could sell the story to Life magazine. And so they contacted Life magazine, and they loved the idea of this. And so they did a whole series of photographs of them diving abalone, and everybody to dive abalone, and they sent it to Life magazine, and then Life magazine sat on it for a little while, and then World War II broke out, and they didn't want to. So these pictures sat for many years. No one ever saw them until we found them about 30 years ago or so. So we're very happy to have them. So there's my good friend Roy. By the way, I asked Roy as a diver, I said, Roy, what kind of issues could you have? Here's what getting ready to go diving, you see going down that ladder down there. And, he said, as I mentioned, you look at the helmet, you can see them bent. Look at these guys are getting tossed around in the water, constantly thrown up against the rocks, underwater and whatnot. He said sometimes one time he was underwater 30 feet, so one time the rock current was so strong, the rock kicked up, hit the helmet, cracked the glass on his helmet, right? I mean, you're 30 feet below the Monterey Bay, and you just cracked the glass on your helmet, what are you going to do? And you want to get to the surface, right? They can't just pull it up, he weighs too much. He has to release the valve, how his helmet will fill the suit with air, it'll float back up like a big balloon. But even that would take too long. So what he does, and I think this is the most remarkable thing, he reaches through his abalone basket, pulls out the abalone, it's just a big marine snail, right? Take the abalone, stick it on the glass, and the abalone split the crack to stop the water. Goes to the surface, change the glass, starts all over again, right? He told me he was older than I were taught how to do that. So clearly it was an issue for the guy you had down there. So this is actually not a stage photograph. This is one of the only photographs we have of an actual abalone diving boat operating. This is actually taken at Point Sur. Anybody's taken that tour of the Point Sur light station? I'm actually a docent at the Point Sur light station. And this is on the road to the lighthouse. And it's taken by a fish and game biologist named J.B. Phillips. And it took me a couple of years to actually figure out where it was standing to take this picture. You can see the dive boat in the water, and you can see the diver. You can see the bubbles in the water. And the guy that's at the stern of the boat with the sculling oar. So the scull is a Japanese technology, Asian technology, and it came, and what it was, the skull. You use the skull, you track the diver by the bubbles in the water. You don't need to use a motor. You're using that oar, a big oar. We follow the diver around the water to do that. And I've been in Japan, and I had the opportunity to try that with the skull. It's really difficult, but once you get the hang of it, I can see how it works really well. You can see how they can move that thing and do that. So they bring the abalone, as mentioned, they go for 3 days at a time. The boxes in the back of that boat are called live boxes. They're made out of redwood. They're made locally by the Monterey Boat Works. The Sino brothers. This is also technology that came from Japan. That's how they kept the abalone fresh. They cut every daily catch would be put onto these boxes, would put into these boxes, and then on top of each other, and then put in the water, so they kept the abalone fresh while they're on the dive, and bring it into Monterey. So this is the Monterey work down there. And they come in with 200, 300 dozen large red abalones. Here they are unloading the abalone into one of the canneries right there. So there's big large red abalones right there. And this is inside one of the canneries. In fact, this is inside the cannery. Larry Oda's father was the manager of this cannery. There were 3 canneries on the wharf. One of them was a big co-op. And that's what this was. You can see all the ladies there. I love this picture, actually. And all the abalone there, and the folks working on the cannery. And they're slicing the abalone steaks right there. Roy Hattori's mother had a cannery of her own. And she had a contract with Pop Ernest to make the big steaks for his restaurant. And now people are pounding abalone to make it nice and fresh. This is on the wharf. You see right there. And that's what I have. So that's all before World War II, right? So thank you very much. And I'm going to turn it over to Charlie. I love this picture, by the way. This is also from a little, the American flag. All right, thank you.
Tim's a hard act to follow. He has a lot of props, so I didn't bring it. Usually, when he talks about sardines, he has this plastic sardine that he waves around. But my name is Larry Oda. As Tim said, I've been around for a long time. My grandfather actually came in 1906 to work in the fishing industry, and he lived across the street from that Japanese fishing village down on Cannery Road until about 1926 when he built his own house up on Fulton Street. In 1926 he also opened his own cannery, which is now the site of the open ocean exhibit of the Monterey Bay Aquarium. So, yeah, the family's been around a long time. I kind of got interested in things, and I find artifacts underneath the house that piqued my interest. So Tim talks about abalone. The other fish that Noda found or discovered was salmon. And when he wrote back to Japan to let the Japanese government know about the abalone, he also mentioned the abundance of salmon in the bay. And again, no one was fishing for salmon. And in 1909, I think it was, Tim, that the local newspaper did a survey of the boats that fish for salmon in Monterey Bay. And they counted 185 boats fishing for salmon. 145 of them were Japanese boats. So you can see that Tim mentioned that 70% of the, over 70% of the businesses on Fisherman's Wharf were Japanese controlled. The fuel docks, ship's chandlery, and the fish processing. So that was also another part of the Japanese influence on the Monterey Bay, the fishery. That was all lost during World War II. So Tim mentioned, he showed pictures of the abalone processing co-op. My grandfather worked at an abalone, or not, fish processing, sardines, squid, whale meat on Cannery Row. My dad worked on Fisherman's Wharf in the actual fish processing. So the sardines that were eaten prior to 1914 came from Europe. They're the small sardines. You may have eaten the canned sardines, you know, and Tim, do you have your sardine? So the Monterey sardine is a lot bigger.
Big.
A lot oilier. So it wasn't as popular as the European sardines. But in 1914, you know what happened? World War I. It shut down the North Sea fishery. So you know, the Monterey sardine became very popular. It has nothing to do with the Japanese, but well, what happened was that the sardines from Monterey became more profitable to use as fish meal, fertilizer, and chicken feed. So Tim tells a story of that the Foster Farms, you know, the chicken folks, owe their
Right, the bones of the Monterey sardine.
yeah, because before that, chickens were very expensive. But using the sardine meal, they became more plentiful. It was cheaper. You know, you could have 2 chickens in every pot. Yeah, so that's an aside of the sardines. But so yeah, up in the upper left, you can see the abundance of abalone that were processed and yeah, okay, yeah. So let me see if I can work this thing. I wanted to show this picture because the woman closest, or on the right-hand side, is my wife's aunt. And the third woman on to the left is her mother, so my wife's grandmother. And this is inside the co-op. So
Do you know what year roughly that picture?
that was probably 1938.
Yeah, 38.
And And, yeah, I think that there were a whole bunch of pictures that were taken by, was it Ray?
Ray Russell and J.D. Phillips, fish and game biologists, they both took in the same year.
Right.
So, and there's a picture of both of those in there.
Yeah, anyway, this is kind of the story of the Japanese prior to World War II. And then afterwards, these days, folks think that the Italians, the Sicilians, started the fishery. You know, they were known for fishing the sardines. But prior to that, it was the Japanese. Prior to that, that was the Chinese. Not as big. I think the sequence is the Rumsons, collected abalone. You know, I think if you remember the movie Dances with Wolves, Kevin Costner, the regalia that the Indians wore, you can see the abalone shells on the regalia. And there's, you don't catch an abalone in North Dakota. But yeah, so the Native Americans, Rumsins, the Chinese, actually before then I think are in the middle and were the Portuguese whalers, the Chinese, the Japanese, and then today everyone thinks that the Sicilians, the Italians were, they controlled Fisherman's Wharf. So, but we had an influence in fishing. There was also an influence, not as much in Monterey, but in the Salinas Valley. You know that Salinas Valley is known as, became known as the salad bowl of the world in the 1930s. And because of the abundance of vegetables that were shipped out. I like to point out that there's over half of those vegetables were grown by Japanese farmers. And I guess the remarkable part of that is that the Japanese farmers only had 40% of the land. So they were very productive. And unfortunately, they lost that advantage in World War II. Although, well, up until recently, there's a company known as Tanimura and Anna in Salinas that was the largest grower shipper of lettuce in the world. But with I think it was Dole Foods that is buying up a lot of farms, and so they're now the largest grower shipper of lettuce. But Tanimura and Anna actually only started in 1980, but grew to prominence in that 20 years, 30 years. But I think Tim has a short video that he'd like to show he found a video that of home video, or not a video, home movie of the community in 1930.
Well, I ask a couple things about the film first. But also, I like to emphasize again, it was abalone that brought the Japanese to Monterey. It's abalone money that built that beautiful JC Hall and built the Monterey Wharf. Just a little bit, if you're not members of JCO, all become members of JCO. Larry is the national president of JCO. Organization in the United States, founded in 1929, and Monterey, one of the very first charter members of JCO. So this film we're going to show you, we found this film about JC Hall, I learned recently actually how rare it is. that in the 30s and 40s, there were a number of Japanese American camera clubs around the United States, and they're all making films of their local community. And it was a professor at Northeastern University in Boston. She just found audio film and explained to me that she thinks this is the only one that's left. And it's a film of the Japanese community in Monterey in 1939 and or 1994 is when they made the film. And you'll recognize the Monterey Wharf, other parts of Monterey, and Larry's father is in that film, so you can see that. Back.
And there's no volume, right?
No sound. Yeah, I should point that out.
Hi-fi.
Yeah.
We should have some music.
Now, could everyone see that okay? Big ham. That is Yo Tabata.
Yeah, well, the speakers.
And this is very interesting to see the pictures of the first generation folks. This is Setsuji Kodama, who started the Owl Cleaners. This is my dad. The back of his head. This is a man named Jack Hamaguchi, another abalone processor. You can tell they're working hard watching it. Oh, Ichiro Gota, who is John Gota. I don't know if any of you know him. He was a radiology tech for the hospital. His grandson is one of our members. I don't know who this guy is. He's a prominent Issei, though. All of these guys are, they are prominent enough to be featured in the film. I guess he must have been a good singer, to be called Bing.
Still getting ready. You can do it. Come on.
The stylish sunglasses. They'd be popular today. And we had some outstanding athletes back then.
That's Jack's
Jaime
Park,
Moto.
right? That's Jack's Park.
That's Jack's, well, yeah, Jack's Park, it was situated differently. You can see the stands that they had.
The home plate was opposite side.
Community comes out to watch baseball in a suit and tie. So the back of the grandstand used to be against Franklin Street, and the outfield was where the tennis courts are now.
Mr. Oda, were these professional players?
No, no, this was
Amateur
just
league?
just a bunch of guys that got together. We have pictures of a tournament in 1923 in Watsonville. So there were teams from Watsonville, Salinas, Monterey. And, well, there's Joe again. He's getting this picture taken again. So there's Roy Hattori and his brother coaching, smoking a cigarette.
You see the live oxen? That's John Goda. A young John Goda.
Still trying.
Oh, that's a good one. Very clever. Good use. Pretty risky. Wow.
That's the big starting boat.
What did you say, Drew?
Just one other thing, baseball stuff you saw, Larry Nishikai and Miyamoto, quite an athlete. In 1936 or 37, he was part of a group of Japanese American boys in Northern California that went to Japan, China, and Korea to play baseball. Also baseball, I've been mentioned a few times, my work is in the history of these fisheries for many years. And Monterey is the only place I've ever found where the fishermen have one union. Southern California, Northern California, all the ethnic groups have separate unions. Monterey has one, and I think that's primarily because Monterey was and is still a small town. These guys all grew up together, they all went to school together. The real key I found, these boys all played baseball together. And it was not uncommon for these young Japanese boys to learn to speak some Italian before they learned to speak English, and those Sicilian boys learned to speak some Japanese. I've only seen it here in Monterey. Do that. Thank you.
So speaking of baseball, more, if any of you are going down to the Cal Poly for graduation next week, we have a display of Nisei baseball. I think there were a number of, just like Kai, but a number of baseball players down in San Luis Obispo, Del Bobo, the other, other cities around there. That it was very, very popular. Not only in there, but in the Central Valley, Fresno, and other places. During the war, they had baseball leagues that would travel from camp to camp to compete against each other. And yeah, I think from Gila River, which is near Phoenix, going up to Hart Mountain, Wyoming to play. Yeah, it was quite remarkable. It was, some camps had like 10 teams. So, anyway, if you're down in Cal Poly in the library, we have a nice display. We will have a display up here. We'll bring that display here to our building later this summer. Yeah.
Going on baseball too, at one time, the Japanese American League had 34 teams. Now, in California, and now there's only 12. 4 of them in Northern California and 8 in Southern California. And our chapter sponsor one of the teams. So if anybody has a free Saturday in August, because all the teams come to here in August because of the weather. It's cooler.
Yeah.
Lodi, Fresno.
Yeah. So the teams are playing at NPC on Saturday, and it's free
Every Saturday in August?
in August. Yes, no, August for our team.
Which team, and which day?
Amberjacks.
It's the first Saturday.
It's actually in our last newsletter, so if you email us, we can send you the,
We have cards on the table, and with our email address and Facebook address, so you can check out what we're doing.
thank you. August 1. First home game.
There's no game.
Yeah, August 1.
What does the JA?
Japanese American Citizens League. Right, yeah, it's a long name.
Of the Monterey Peninsula.
Yeah, our chapter is even longer. Yeah. And yes, ma'am.
You could share the bit about them when they played with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig.
So, I forget, what was it, 1927, when Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig put together teams. There was a traveling team that would play throughout the country. And the most famous one was we have a picture of Lou Gehrig, Babe Ruth, with 3 of the Japanese American baseball players, and the Japanese American pitcher was so good that he struck out Babe Ruth a number of times, but Babe would stay up at the plate because he wanted to hit the ball. And he did eventually, but it was as I mentioned, there were some real good athletes in the community. But that's we have that picture, in that display. So if you're a baseball fan, look out for our newsletter and come see the display. That it? Oh, yes, ma'am.
What's the Marina Library one going to cover?
So that's going to be the war and afterwards up to current time. So we made a documentary of, we call it the Monterey Petition, Enduring Democracy, where when the concentration camps were closed and the Japanese were going to be released, there were groups that didn't want the Japanese to come back, primarily the agriculture industry, because of what I mentioned about the dominance of the Japanese in agriculture. So there was a petition, resolutions passed by county supervisors to discourage the Japanese from returning to the West Coast. That upset the people, some of the people on the Monterey Peninsula, and they circulated a petition of their own. And there were about 500 signatures saying, you know, these are our neighbors, you know, it's a democratic way of life for all, and we welcome, you know, our friends back. So we made a documentary on that. Some of the prominent people that signed that signed the petition were John Steinbeck, Ed Ricketts, and Weston,
Robinson Jeffers.
Robinson Jeffers. You know, Robinson Jeffers was a poet laureate of the United States prior to World War II. So, and he had a home in Carmel.
Where can that documentary be seen?
If you come on
You can see it on the
May
30th.
30th.
May 30th to the Marina Library, yes, we'll be showing that. We have two versions. One's a half-hour version for classroom use, and then an hour version with more interviews.
We have the short version in the library that you can borrow, but not the long version.
Together. Go to your library and you can.
It was actually shown on PBS this past summer, and you can go to the PBS website and you can
It's on
type in
hold.
"During Democracy" and you can find it that way.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to recommend, if anybody has not seen it, Beyond Barbed Wire, a documentary that was filmed here on the peninsula. Excellent. And there was also a professor from MPC who wrote the Monterey Peninsula, the Nice of the Monterey Peninsula. And it was a great book, and you'll recognize names.
Yeah, I think
It's a very good read.
there's a copy here.
There's a copy here, yeah. On our display, we had some local history books. A couple got checked out, but there's a couple more still out there if you want to take a look.
Yeah, so Dr. David Yamada wrote the history of the Japanese
Thanks.
back in '93.
Right.
Yeah. Lots of history here. You know, we forget a lot of things, so
We learn by history.
read. Tell your friends.
Do you have the movie here too, by any chance?
We did last week, I know.
Well,
Things
but it
get
is
checked out.
circulated,
Yeah,
good,
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Yeah.
We'll probably show it again at the hall
Yeah,
eventually.
eventually.
Yeah.
Well, great. Well, thank you. You know, I think we went over time. I want to thank the library for providing this.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Tim.